Peace, community. Welcome to All Things Genuine Podcast. I am your host, Demetria, and if you are new, welcome. And if you are returning, welcome back. Gratitude for each of you tuning in and joining me on this genuine journey. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025, and I am back with another genuine episode. And today's episode will actually be about the month of May. And I don't necessarily have a script, but I did notate some notes to keep myself in alignment with this episode. But before I do begin, I hope that everyone in the collective is doing well and that you're having a beautiful Tuesday. I know I myself, in a moment or so, I do want to see a sunset and I may take part in that. But I decided to come on air because I wanted to come on yesterday, and yesterday was actually more fitting for me. But once again, I'm always being in obedience when it comes to my actions and my intentions for the most part. And by no means am I perfect in my walk, but I do have intentions as my awareness and my consciousness is heightened. But moving further along, like I said, I wanted to talk about the month of May, and I'll go ahead and get started with looking at the overall theme of what I wanted to talk to you all about collectively. But I do want to share something that took place on the very 1st of May. And it really, further pushed me into the direction to share the things that I'm going to share with the collective. So on the 1st of May, I want to say I was on my way back from taking my son to play basketball. And after that, I decided to stop to get him, something to snack on and things of that nature. And right as I was beginning to pay for my transaction, there was an elder gentleman behind me who offered to pay for my transaction in its entirety. And all I could do was be, truly grateful for the experience. And I walked out of the grocery that day and I was like, full of gratitude. And it just reminded me to always keep in mind that there are, humankind that are in tune and they operate and give from a generous space, not, looking to receive anything in return. It was a completely genuine transaction, or I shall say engagement. And I just, really held my head high and I was like, what a day, to start off the month of May. And so I just wanted to share that with you all. And normally, I experience things like that from time to time, throughout this journey called life. And I have, been inspired in those moments to, keep the torch, going and passing it by doing that and giving someone else an experience such as that elder gentleman did for me as well. And as I say that, I feel like I'm in alignment. Anytime that I see certain things on this journey, I take it as confirmation and that I'm pretty much in alignment. But moving further along into today's episode, like I said, I wanted to talk about the month of May, and I once again do have some notes. So let me go ahead and start with the topics. So I wanted to talk about family first. And the reason why I wanted to talk about family is simply because I have two, relatives that are no longer in this physical realm, and they both, impacted me greatly. And I just want to honor them in this moment in the month of May. And I want to do it in a very beautiful, authentic way. And I first want to talk about my grandmother, whom, transitioned last year in 2024. And her birthday, or her solo return, I shall say, is this month, in the month of May. And I wanted to share some things about my grandmother, if not a thing, because I think it's just the matter of, who she was to me. And, the month of May is also the month that over in the Western, we celebrate Mother's Day. And I honestly have begun to celebrate motherhood daily, and I've been doing it, I feel, throughout my entire motherhood journey. Well, I wouldn't say to its entirety, because like I said, the key word is learning, but I've been so open to that path and what that looks like. But moving further along in regards to Mother's Day and, where it's celebrated and when in the Western, I wanted to talk about how special it is. And this will actually be my very first time not being able to celebrate my grandmother in the physical realm, but I always honor her, and she's always in my mind and in real time, and I still feel her even in today. I paused for a moment because I wanted to look for the right words to say, but I do think about that during this time in the month of May. Now, I'll move further along in regards to my cousin, who actually transitioned in the month of May. And she transitioned some time ago, but I wanted to share, like I said, I want to honor them both in very unique ways, for each of them. But what I wanted to share about my cousin and was the simple fact I want to talk about her transition and dream resonance that I had of her in the now. And it also ties into a quote by Dick Gregory. And I've spoke of him, on my podcast previously, but I'll move further with this sharing about her. So, like I said, my cousin, she transitioned in the month of May. And at the time, I remember after her burial services, I had gone back to Virginia at the time. And I remember going to sleep and waking up from a dream. And I remember being emotional and just feeling like it was so real. It felt like I was really there. I was near her. I could talk to her. And, I asked her a question and she answered. And within that dream, she pretty much um, was acknowledging, the process of what was happening throughout her transition. She didn't go in detail, of course, but one thing that stood out to me that I couldn't really understand at that time, because I was only age 15 at the time of her transitioning. And I remember being, not able to grasp that it can happen to, of course, I knew that things happen to people, but it hit home for me that you could be that young and you can transition, and I just really learned a lot from that experience. But I remember she made a statement in that dream, and when I asked her, if she could come back, and she simply said that she couldn't do that. And, next thing you know, from what I recollect, I awoke. And from that, I remember sitting in a reality where I had to have radical acceptance that my cousin was no longer in the physical, in that moment. And it was very eye opening, and it really changed me, on so many degrees. Like, I really started going through, changes for sure back then. But moving further along in regards to the dream resonance, I want to say maybe like a couple of years ago, I was either in meditation or maybe I was just in nature, and something really clicked to me. Maybe I thought of her, and I believe that when I had this thought of her, something clicked that, as I was having a simultaneously or simultaneous um, epiphany and realization about me no longer turning back to what was, accepting that I could no longer go back because I could no longer unsee or avoid and embody that type of energy and that frequency or those frequencies that come with choosing to embody. I just didn't want to associate with that. And I accepted that in that moment. And at the same time, like I said, simultaneously, I had the remembrance of the dream that I had of my cousin after she transitioned. And she simply stated that she too couldn't come back. And it's like, when one transitions, especially even in the real life, because I feel like as human beings on this journey, especially as we're in real time evolving and change is, ever constant in, this realm that we're in, excuse me. As I say that, I see that I'm 333 seconds or point 0.3 seconds into today's episode. And I really don't want to be too long, but moving further along, I I almost lost track, and y'all gonna catch this in real time because I don't want to edit in that way. I really just want this to be authentic and you all get it on air. But what I pretty much was saying was that that dream that I had, finally once again made resonance. And then to tie it into the great Dick Gregory, may he rest in eternal peace, he made a statement about the rose colored glasses that some of us get chosen to wear or get chosen to take off, and we kind of see things. And please forgive me if I'm butchering the statement that he made, but he made a statement to the extent of like no longer being able to see things from a rose colored glass perspective. It's like you see things clearly, you see things from, many perspectives. And a thing that I found to be interesting, and if I didn't mention already, I will mention some esoteric things in nature on today's episode, but it will be mindful in how I give it, but I will bring it all full circle. But in regards to esoteric things in nature, I found it so funny that Dick Gregory is also a fellow Libran when it comes to the sun placement specifically. And I thought that was very interesting because a lot of his career path involved him speaking and just being in that very much of a Libran energy. And he was very much active, he was very much expressive, especially when it came to our culture, the people of the indigenous backgrounds. And I really, admire a lot of the things that he talked about. And as I say that again, I see numbers of alignment, and I'll share them with you all collective. I said I saw earlier something that really reminded me that I was in alignment, and that specifically was a time in essence. And it was 7:07 p.m. and now I'm looking at 7:17 p.m. specifically. So I love to see that. I love when I see, a sequence of numbers, because for me, yes, sometimes I let it go, like it just is what it is. But other times it's like I can actually feel the vibration, and intuitively I'm on to something, and then I'll just, at random look at the clock or look at the timer and it'll say such a number. But moving further along, I feel like I want to wrap it up when it comes to my cousin because I feel like I brought it all full circle. But I'm so glad that I had that resonance now because I too can't go back. Just like my cousin, while going through that transition, that she went through, she can no longer be here in the present, in the now, in the physical form that I knew her to be. And I understood that, very deeply. And I needed to, because like I said, that was an experience for me that I really didn't see coming, and such is life. But moving further along in regards to the topics that I wanted to talk about, I think I did briefly speak about the holiday in the Western, Mother's Day, coming up soon. And wanted to actually spend a brief moment talking about motherhood and the beauty of it. I feel that motherhood is such a blessing, and I feel that it opens one up or a mother up in so many ways that she couldn't even notice. And I'm going to speak for myself specifically. The love that I give to my son here now, the journey hasn't been perfect, but what journey is, especially considering all of the differences and the challenges and the obstacles when it comes to, generations meshing together and, that whole thing that comes with us in this world at this time. And I think about that and I really consider that. And it has allowed me to really be graceful with myself on this healing journey. But moving back to the topic of motherhood, what I genuinely wanted to talk about is how beautiful it is to be chosen to walk this path, to get to be a mother to something that we've birthed. And I've spoken on the journey briefly, and I've talked about how pretty much when we give birth to our children, and of course, it's a mesh of ourselves and the person that we create that human with. All of those things are, put into that child in essence. And that very child is a reflection of who we both are in those moments. Although they end up developing their own personal identity, they are still the very existence of the two souls meshing. And I think about that. And I feel so honored because, like I said, I see a lot of myself in my son, and I also see a lot of his father in essence. And I just look at it once again as a blessing and an opportunity to love those parts of myself and the parts of, his father, and really appreciate, what we've made in essence. And my son is such a blessing. He teaches me so many things and lessons. And I'm just glad that I've been open instead of avoidant to change, because I come from a generation of adults and individuals that are really locked into their ways of being. They're really stubborn, they're not open to change. It's like one way or another. And my son, with love, with care, and with guidance, and redirection, once again, I just love how open I am on this journey with motherhood. But I'll wrap that up. And, I send blessings to all of the mothers on this planet. And speaking of mothers, I feel that it would be, very disconnected of me and avoidant of me, and having a lack of responsibility if I don't acknowledge the mothers on the planet in this moment who are grieving. And I didn't really have intention to talk about this subject this soon because, like I said, I'm also going off a list just to keep myself into alignment while recording. But I wanted to, wow. And when I talked about alignment specifically, I just looked up at the timer and I'm at 555 point 2 seconds. And once again, for me, I take it as a synchronistic symbol of alignment. But I want to acknowledge and give honor in this space to acknowledge all of the mothers on this planet that are suffering at any degree, because suffering is suffering. And I just want you to know that I see you. I'm sending love and light and positive vibrations to you, because when you're feeling and you're going through moments of suffering, you can feel very low in those moments, and your frequency isn't the highest. Even if you try to cover it, it's like it's exuding in your actions, and even when you could be talking, and some of you may be good at holding things in while you're walking, but I just want you to know that I see you, and I just want to honor and acknowledge you, and give you the respect and the gratitude. It takes a lot for um, a mother, specifically to pick herself up, especially in the moments of suffering. But I want to also give acknowledgement to the mothers at this time that are losing their children in ways that are unimaginable and just very tragic. And I don't even have the words to do what's happening justice. In this moment, I want to give acknowledgement and I want to honor the mothers that are the mothers of martyrs who are suffering at the very hands of a genocide and a strategic way to wipe out lives, and speaking of wipe out lives, I said lives, I meant to say wipe out lives. Right now, there's famine all over this planet, but I want to give acknowledgement to one that I've just been, made um, aware of, and I've kind of, not kind of, I've been aware of for some time now, but it's now over, a 60-day period of humans not having access to basic essential needs to survive. And I saw a video recently of a young child, and there was a warning to pretty much to, prepare myself. But it's like, even that sentence alone is like, why would I even have to prepare? You know what I mean? And I just remember just, breathing in that moment. And the footage that I saw was the footage of a young child, going from one way of being informative to emotionally outpouring with anger, and then that anger turning into tears. And I'm just, sitting here watching this footage, and it's unbearable to watch and to know that at this very moment in time you have such a world that we live in. It's so dystopian to see that you have people showing up at entertainment spaces or in entertainment spaces. You have other people really still in this moment remaining silent while children and mothers and essentially innocent people are dying, and no one is saying anything. It's like all are complying. And I just want to give acknowledgement to those mothers. And I also want to give acknowledgement to what's happening in Sudan and the Congo. Like I said again, famine is taking place all over this planet. The stories that are coming out of the Sudan are so heartbreaking, especially the cases and the talks about rape. I don't know what it is when it comes to this sexual exploitation, when it comes to different nations and bodies of innocent people. It's like, why is rape such a focus? Why do the men, and I understand now, even being a woman in the Western, I have taken notice. And as I say that, 727, another, sevens are very, very important for me at this time. And as I'm even saying this, I'm looking at the timer. I first saw 706 seconds, but then when I was getting ready to share that with you all, I saw 707 seconds. So I'm going to keep going in this message, but I've been thinking about that, and I know I'm not the only one. What is it with the sexual exploitation of women, and not just only women? I see it in men. And I'm gonna, let me actually type this so I don't forget it. But I wanted to talk about that further. But all of the things coming out of the Sudan regarding the women and the children, and I seen the most horrific footage that was recorded, if I'm not mistaken, towards the end of April, of about 30 people, if I'm not mistaken, being executed. Men, boys, even. And all I could think about is, the children, and what if this was happening here in real time? I really encourage you all to, and show up in ways that you can, in these moments. And I know it's getting crazier and crazier by the day it seems. I've seen so many things. I'm really tapped in with a lot of different outlets, especially when it comes to, these moments and injustices. And one of the platforms that I currently um, look to when it comes to information, because I'm not really big on the news, and in no way, shape, or form is this part of my episode a sponsorship or a partnership. Although I would love and be open to talking to them about the work that they do and learning more about these individuals outside of me browsing and doing my own research. But the company that I speak of is so informed, and you all can find them, on certain social media outlets. And they too are working and being a part of this movement of separating and sharing information with the collective of us who tune in to those wavelengths of, information specifically. I'm a part of that movement as well, when it comes to shifting and detaching and re-narrating what that looks like when it comes to showing up in this work. And you can find them once again, like I said, on social media outlets that they exist. I can't really tell you all in this moment, as I don't really recollect them, but Instagram for sure. But moving further along, they had shared things, in regards to the laws and the bills that are being introduced, when it comes to Congress. And I have been mind blown, but really grounded, because I know what I know. And what I mean by that is I'm aware of, a system and a matrix that is set up to program the masses. And I'm just no longer a part of that. And my consciousness has risen, and or I would say has risen in that aspect. But I feel that not only myself, all of humanity at this time is experiencing a heightened awareness, especially when it comes to awareness. We are in the age of Aquarius, and that part of this episode will be a bit esoteric in nature. But if you know anything about that energy, if you've ever experienced Aquarian energy, it's very advanced, it's very informative, it's very innovative. It can also be a bit fixated, because it is a fixed energy. And I really see that in this time. It's like, we're really not aligned with anything other than the things that I just mentioned. I feel that humanity is ready for innovation. I feel that we're ready for advancement when it comes to our population. I feel that we are ready, for just a hopeful situation, because Aquarian energy is also associated with the star. And when I think of the stars, I think of wishes, I think of hopes, I think of desires. And as I was just saying that, I was thinking of one of my favorite records. And if I'm not mistaken, let me not butcher the artist, because it's very well known, this song that I'm hearing. And let me go to my library. I think it's Royce, and I think I'm right. I am right. It is Wishing on a Star by Rose Royce. I love that record. And she talks about wishing on a star. So I see that energy, and I really do feel, even though it's very dark in these moments, I haven't lost hope for humanity. And my hope is that we all continue to be open to this age of information and enlightenment. And as you all can see, and follow me throughout this journey with all things genuine, you can see me. I didn't delete certain things intentionally, because I used to be very equipped in the frequency of, wanting things to be perfect, and really wanting that perfect image of it has to look this way, my journey has to be this way. But I rarely held on to that energy. I do want to say I'm a Cusper baby slash Virgo slash Libra, but I really don't honor that in totality because, in Chinese astrology specifically, it's completely different from Western astrology. And I see why, especially as I'm unlearning and relearning a lot of things that have been taught and just, given to us, within humanity. But I am moving further along in regards to the things that I was sharing because it's so much information that I'm sharing. Like I was saying, I let go that whole narrative of wanting things to be perfect. But you all will see when I first started this, I had this gut intuitive feeling that it would be bigger than me. It would be really about all things genuine. And I genuinely feel about, the injustices of this world and really, advocating for that. I've always been very vocal. I feel like I became radicalized really at an early age, especially within my family when unfair things were at play. But when I really learned about things within this world, education wise, I believe I was in like middle school when I began to learn about more in depth about like the history of this country and the things that took place and what happened. And I believe I was in middle school specifically, or one would call it junior high or junior. Neither here nor there, but I was in middle school and I just remember being in, I believe, my history class and learning about things. And for the first time, feeling, like this incredible, immense amount of emotions to what was being taught in those, lessons in that class. And I just remember, a student getting up and, reacting in a very powerful way. Like they were upset, really to say. And they had gone out into the hallway and all I know is I heard like a bang, in middle school there's like lockers along the halls and the student was just really moved by what was being taught. And I'm not going to kid you, I feel like in that moment it really radicalized a part of me because I knew that things had taken place within this country. And of course I knew from certain things growing up. And but more so specifically as I was taught and I learned, and I just did education, or I furthered my education when it came to these situations, especially when it came to watching movies or documentaries or just really being in tune with, my culture and the things within my environment and just really making sense of all things. And going from there, I've really been a curious spirit on my journey or throughout my entire journey, and I'm still that way today. But moving further along, because I want to be mindful in the things that I give you all, um, and I'm working on my arms. I'm working on my arms. When it comes to the next things that I do want to talk about, I do also want to further because I did get a bit off topic in regards to honoring and acknowledging the mothers. I feel like more needs to be done, when it comes to what we're doing collectively. As you all can see, I have been in this space of really feeling away and just distraught and just really a plethora of other things. I feel angry at the degree of silence and complicity and the lack thereof, that we're doing, as humanity. We're seeing before our very eyes innocent groups of people suffer from starvation, suffer from genocide, suffer from displacement, and a plethora of other things that they're facing. And it really rocks me at a core. And I really wanted to honor that, everything, even down to me eating. I was preparing a meal the other day and wow, I'm sitting here thinking to myself in regards to what it is that I was eating. But even before I took my first bite, I was very grateful for just having that because I'm aware that on the other side of this planet, there are people, there are children crying, and dying because they don't have the essential tools to even make bread, for example. I've seen babies crying for flour, sifting through debris and flour. It's so hurtful to see, but I've been grateful, just and thankful for the water that I have access to, right? The bed that I can lie in, the peaceful space that I'm in, just in this present moment. Like, they don't know what that is in this moment, and it's completely different experiences, and it's like, what makes it more, you know I can't even find the right words to describe what I'm feeling, but what makes it right for there to be such a difference in experiences in this life, especially when it comes to basic human essential needs? My heart goes out to every mother, and I also want to give balance and be very reciprocal in no way, shape, or form. When I acknowledge the mothers, I just feel like I know that there are a lot of individuals that are healing at this time. You have a collective of women, or shall I say, divine feminines and goddesses that are healing their feminine energy and healing their masculine actively. And then in the same breath, you also have men, or shall I also say, divine masculines and gods, and also, if I haven't said it already, which is I feel like I have, divine masculine energies that, they're also too healing the divine masculine within and their feminine as well, because we all embody both energies. It took two to create, who you and I are, at certain levels. And I really am getting out of the energy or the movement of giving a title to everything. I know that we come here as who we are. And, one thing's for sure, like I said again, we all embody both masculine and feminine. And, I just want to acknowledge that for a moment, because I did give a lot to the mothers. And moving further, I do feel that, for those of you that receive me and you receive me from a very pure and genuine space, you'll know what I mean when I share this space. And I won't, go in detail and share it in this way again, but I'm very, in tune with what it means to be reciprocal with energy. I'm not just going to sit and focus, on the suffering of mothers, specifically, but I also know that fathers are suffering. And in this very moment, I also, too, want to give acknowledgement to the fathers, the grandfathers, and even the grandmothers, because I know I mentioned mothers, the aunts, the uncles, all of the family members, essentially. um, I just, I send light and love, and I'm praying, and, I'm advocating. I'm even sharing in my space, which is shared amongst platforms, no matter the censorship or flags in that nature, because what am I saying, from an ill will space? And I also check myself before coming on and recording, especially with these messages, because I feel like, delivery is so important. You can get certain things through when you're angry, and you're feeling very emotional, but you can also get, things through from a very calm, respectable, just mindful space too. And I really wanted to be mindful about the things that I'm saying, and show that I'm not just moved by my emotions as an empathetic, intuitive, and being in that feminine energy overall. I'm not just moving in that. I'm really, witty and wise when it comes to these situations. But I do want to, say that my heart goes out to the masculines who are also suffering in this moment across the planet, and even in the Western, because there are a lot of men, even in this moment. I noticed that there are a lot of feminine platforms that cater to, the feminine energy and the quality of being a woman, and just all those beautiful things that, I see, women creators, or I don't even want to call them women creators. I just want to say creators who are, really aligned with their feminine energy. I love to see it, and by, no means is this portion of my episode shadowing these creatives. I just feel like I see a number of, feminine energies, but I also do see masculine, and I won't say that, but I feel like there needs to be a balance. We need more of that masculine energy, and I have seen, some, submerging or resurfacing or surfacing, because a lot of individuals aren't really in agreement with the social media of today's modern time, and I get it. It isn't what it used to be. There's a lack of balance. I was starting to think back, and I had this conversation some time ago with my cousin, and we were just talking about how when we first started to engage with social media, how did we remain in that balance? Because we were in a midst of a balance for a good deal of years, and somewhere along this journey it's like things became imbalance, and we were talking about getting back to that space. Now that we're wiser and we're growing and evolving, we had that conversation, and I'm like, I'm just not I'm not totally against the whole era of certain social media platforms, but when it comes to me showing up personally in that space, I just don't feel that it's beneficial for me to show up in that way. And, also, for a plethora of reasons, I'll just say that. And as I say that, I know that I'm in alignment. I just saw that I was at 1,234 seconds. And I know translated for me in synchronicity terms, that is 1, 2, 3, 4. And what more, alignment do you need for confirmation? So I'll say that. But to wrap that portion up, and I'm just, really trying to stay in alignment because I see that I'm already going a lengthy time when it comes to recording, but I'm going to keep flowing. And I also wanted to talk about it keeps slipping my mind before I wrap up, that honoring of fathers too. I also wanted to talk about some individuals that have really come to me, on a spiritual and mental and emotional level. I really have been in spaces where I've really honored and just really felt the things that have come up to the surface when I allow myself to be in tune with my humanity. And the beings that I speak of is specifically um, Khalid and Reem. And if you know of these two, Khalid was the Palestinian or Palestinian, I'll say, because the more I learn, the more that I want to honor what I've learned by actually implementing those changes um, as I journey and give it to you all collectively. But once again, like I said, his name was Khalid, and he was from Palestine, and he had a granddaughter by the name of Reem. And Reem, unfortunately, tragically, she was killed in this genocide. And when this happened, I believe, through the rubble, he found his granddaughter, and he simply said that she was the soul to his soul. And as I share that, once again, another moment of alignment, it's 7:47. And I keep seeing increments of 10, so I don't know what that really represents. Actually, I'll correct my verbiage. I do know what that means, but on a spiritual aspect, but it's really letting me know that I'm in alignment while I'm sharing these things. But like I said, he called his granddaughter the soul of his soul. And, you know, Khalid was also um, killed during this genocide. And everybody was so saddened because even after the transition, the tragic transition of his granddaughter, he kept, being of service to his people, to his community, even while being under siege and being under heavy bombardment. And I just saw so much bravery in what he did before he transitioned tragically. But I've seen, footage of him recently resurfacing, and I've taken the time to really, look at it and see what the people are sharing about him, even some new things that I'd never seen. And it just reminded me to be um, heart centered. I said centered, heart centered, and just really faith centered as well. And these people that I've watched, deal with this suffering at such a great capacity, their faith is so um, inspiring and just breathtakingly moving, to say the least, because it's like out of all of this tragedy, they're here praising, the Most High, or Allah, as they call it, Allah. And, I really, just I gained so much strength, and my perspective heightened just seeing a human exhibit their humanity while even still being in service and suffering. And even, I'll be honest, his suffering was really, not seen, from what I've gathered. And he's always been joyful. He's always been friendly and just a generous spirit, within his community. And I just really wanted to, honor Khalid and Reem. She was such a beautiful little girl, and she deserved to live, and so did Khalid. And may they both rest in eternal peace. And speaking of those two beings, I also wanted to talk about Hind as well. And she too was one that came to mind. And I thought about how the students in the West on the college campuses, the college encampments specifically, stood in solidarity with Hen name being one of the names that they chanted and that they acknowledged. And she was the little girl who was surrounded by her deceased family members who had been killed as well by this genocide and this target. And, she was awaiting aid, and that aid that was coming to aid her and save her were also murdered en route. And her vehicle, or the vehicle that she resided in, was shot at so many times. I can't recollect the number, but just know that it was more than numerous times that the shots were fired. And recently, she's resurfaced because they have actually identified the sergeant, or the person that was in charge of that entire mission and that target. And I just wanted to give, honor and acknowledgement. May Hen rest in peace, and may her and her family, along with Khalid and Reem, receive the justice that they didn't get on this earthly realm. May they receive it in the spiritual and every life hereafter. And, just moving further along, I want to continue with the things that I genuinely wanted to talk about. And, just wrapping up with that theme, with that theme comes a lot of grief, right? Well, I am one that is, I'm not new to the experience of grief and what grief is. And as I've been healing, throughout this journey, I do not want to be avoidant in none of this. And I feel like I've done a great job throughout this journey of really honoring my feelings and what I feel, and allowing those emotions to really be acknowledged and move, through me. And it's really been helpful. I don't really feel the heaviness that I felt when it was all, very much present, right? You could hear the pain in my voice. You could hear the sadness and everything that was associated with me in those very raw yet authentic moments. I, in the now, feel, a sense of lightness. And I'm so grateful that I was steadfast in my journey to move forward and, really be, you know, committed to this new direction. And I want to talk about grief. And I want to talk about what influenced me to talk more about it. So, On my vision board, I have a quote by Regina King, but it's not necessarily this quote, but it's more so an interview that she done some time ago, and it was in regards to grief, and she was questioned about it specifically, and she talked about how grief is just love with no place to go. And it may not be to that exact verbiage, but it was something to that extent. And it's like in the moments that I was in, I needed to hear those words and I needed to hear it from that perspective. Even though her grievances that she was speaking of were completely different, I too have been through, moments where I've experienced, death and that transition and those changes that happen when you're enduring those moments. So it really opened me up and I saw things from a much more perspective because I'm really all about what I can, receive. I'll never shut things out and think I know it all and just see things in one way. Like, I want to see it all, if that is available. But I'm always open to that idea of expansion. And with me doing that, I'm always also aware that I can take things and learn from that as well. And with that, statement that Regina gave, what I took away from that, and I actually notated it because I wanted to make sure that I gave it to you all, you know, in in a I guess a very accurate way, I shall say. But I wanted to once again reiterate a higher perspective on, and just also an add on to Regina King's mention about grief. Grief is just love and a plethora of other emotions that have no place to go. It's like I once heard a gym say, emotions are just moving energy, rising and flowing, awaiting space to be acknowledged. Imagine experiencing grief from that perspective. If we allowed ourselves to sit in the vastness of our emotions when enduring grief, and we simply allow these emotions to move through our bodies freely instead of suppressing, I feel that grief can leave the mind, body, and soul naturally. And when I had that realization, wow, as I say that, it is now 7:57, 10-minute increments throughout this entire episode. And I'm glad that I didn't allow my very, very human moments of wanting things to be perfect. At certain times on this journey, I pushed through that, right? I didn't allow those intrusive thoughts to consume me and have me to start re recording. But once again, what if we did look at grief from that perspective? What if we actually allowed ourselves to sit? And I don't say this to say redundant, but I just feel that, if you didn't get it that first time around when I said it, because I know a lot of times a lot of people don't want to really face the grief. And grief doesn't just pertain to death, of course. It can pertain to a lot of different situations, right? And I get it. A lot of individuals don't want to acknowledge or face that because a lot of things that grief can bring up to the surface, it can be a bit discomforting if you're not used to acknowledging such emotions. The emotions specifically that associate with grief, right? Because I feel like grief can look like many emotions. And if you know, you know. But moving further along, I really wanted to share that piece with you all. But speaking of Regina King, I really do love her work. I've always been inspired by her, and she's someone, when it comes to film specifically, and just how she's carried herself as a woman and as someone of I feel of substance. Like not one time throughout history, and I not it's not that I've went looking, but I don't recall ever, seeing her in a light any different from, what she really embodies. And I've really been inspired. Like I said, I watch her interviews. She's on my vision board. She really does speak a lot of things that really um, I receive as like a pour into me. Like, because if you're going to talk about that, collectively and openly and release it, I just feel like that's something that you want to give. And she has been very expressive and that knowing. And I'm still shocked. I don't know about you all if you do have resonance, which many of us do, of Miss Regina King. She has done many roles when it comes to acting, and I'm still in shock over the Boondocks and how she creatively and phenomenally like played those two characters. And I just want to share that. And speaking of influences and people that have um, really moved me on a very, what's the word that I want to say that would be most fitting? But they really moved me in a very intellectual way. And when I say that, like, I feel that these are some very intelligent beings that I speak of. Even Miss Regina King, in regards to the things that she has given to us, over the years. But recently, I tapped back into an artist that I started listening to back in 2014, and I really love the records that I would be playing. But I speak of the artist Vic Mensa specifically. And speaking of him, I found something to be very interesting when it comes to cosmic information, and I'll tie it all in towards the end of me sharing the things that I wanted to share about the reason that I wanted to talk about Vic Mensa and the influence. So recently, like I said, I tapped back in some time ago and I downloaded some old, vibes that I used to listen to years and years ago. And I was guided to, see what that journey was looking like musically, if there was anything new that I could tap into and support. And I was guided to check into that. And when I did, collective, I noticed that Vic had also, wow, as I'm sharing this again, I see another sign of synchronicity, and it lets me know that I'm in alignment. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Today's episode will be a little bit, not even a little bit, because that doesn't do it justice. It will be a lengthy episode, but I just looked up and I saw 1717. So 1,717 seconds when it comes to recording. But I noticed that Vic had went through some changes, and he was so open and expressive and transparent with that expression with the people within his audience of following, I would say. And I was so in tune with the things that he was saying, and it was so much resonance in that because I'm like, wow, these are the very things that I too have been awakened to and that I too have conscious and knowing of. And I'm like, I knew it was a reason why I listened to, this artist. And it's so amazing to not even only see Vic Mensa, but a plethora of others also go through these awakenings and these sacred journeys. Like, just to peer off just for like a few moments, there was another artist that I noticed, like right at the height of my awakening, that I noticed that was also aware of some of the things that I was enduring and currently experiencing. Like they understood like these messages, these numbers, and just all of these things that we're guided to pay attention to when we start awakening. But the artist that I speak of is Mario. You know, Let Me Love You, etc. Say I'm Just a Friend. Y'all know his records, but he had posted this image of him tatting himself, I believe, or he had a tattoo, and specifically, it was a tattoo with the synchronicity 1111. And I too have that synchronicity tatted upon me, and it's very seeable. I'll say that, if for a lack of a better word, or visible. That's what I wanted to say. It's very visible, but to see that he too had that knowledge of what that meant, and I'm not just saying that he had that knowledge because it's tatted, because I've noticed that there are a collective of individuals that will go on this trend of getting things tatted and not really understanding what its meaning is. I'm aware of that, consciously. And with Mario specifically, in his music, his verbiage, and just how he was, talking, throughout that time, I knew that he too was on that frequency of, consciousness. And he too had gone through some extent of an awakening. And back to Big Mensa, but I wanted to talk about something that he talked about that was interesting. And it was a video that he made, and it was about the current president within Africa. And this man has been talked about, and I also want to acknowledge him. I really feel that he's very brave. He is very intelligent, especially when it comes to information, and he's steadfast, very much giving divine masculine energy. And the man that I speak of is President Ibrahim Traore. And I said that with intention once again because I really want to honor the verbiage. And one thing that I'm learning as I honor these languages and these pronunciation ways of, pronouncing these individuals' names is that English is pretty much broken languages from other nations. And I really wanted to acknowledge that. And I feel that it's important for a lot of individuals to know other languages and study and engage and just have that knowledge, because it's very important. And just moving further along, like I said, I wanted to give acknowledgement to Ibrahim Traore. And it was a video that Big Missa did about him, and it was so hilarious because he was pretty much reacting to a recent video that was made by someone that had shared this same footage, and it was a video with U.S. General Langley, and they were pretty much saying, how much of a concern they had. They were just, it was just really absurd. I'll just say that. And if you want to see that video, I'm pretty sure he still has it posted. But I've really been moved by the content that he's been intentionally sharing with the collective and educating those who are open to receiving such information. And another thing that I found to be of interest, and this is where I will bring it full circle when it comes to esoteric information and how we all really shine where our sun shines at the time that we enter this realm and this thing called life. So with Vic, I did a little bit of research. I took notice that his sun specifically shines in the sign of Gemini. And Gemini is my fellow air element of a sign. And a lot of us, we really shine when it comes to speech or any form of expressing or, communication specifically. And you will see that we will embody those things in many different ways, whether it be in innovative ways, whether it be in very Gemini ways, which can be very curious, and it can be a bit chaotic at times. And we can really see reflective moments with that. And you can look at history for itself when it comes to um, those who have their sun placements in the sign of Gemini. I'll mention the beloved Tupac, who was very, very expressive, very poetic. I love the way he thought. I loved his mind. There's another great of our time, and I'm going to address him as Ye, as he has asked for us, throughout his recent changes and things of that nature. He too has his sun shining in the sign of Gemini, and Miss Lauren Hill as well. And I just wanted to give a shout out. And speaking of Lauren Hill, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Lauren has a birthday in the month of May. If I'm not mistaken, I really be in tune with those that I admire. And yes, I am correct. May 26th to be specific. And I just thought I'd mention that. And I just love how cosmically the stars are always aligning when it comes to our purpose and what we're meant to do and how we're meant to show up and be of service on this planet called Earth. And moving further along when it comes to that, I just wanted to wrap that up in regards to that part of this episode. But moving further along, I also would like to genuinely talk about the oppression. And I paused for a moment because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't being redundant in the information that I was sharing. But like I said again, when I brought everything to a conclusion in regards to acknowledging the fathers as well, on this journey who are suffering from, any degree of anything on this planet. I also wanted to talk about the oppression that a lot of humanity is experiencing. And oppression can be shown in many forms. As we can see in the Western, there's a lot of oppression when it comes to how we speak freely. And I feel that that is really being, taken advantage of and being criminalized in this moment when it comes to what we say and what we feel and how we think and what we choose to do within this country. And I just wanted to genuinely talk about that. I don't know how many are aware or in tune with what's currently happening. I feel like since the very start, this energy of Mars has been very much evident, as I've said, when it comes to esoteric information. Once again, we are in the year of Mars, and I get that from the value of adding up the year that we're in, which is 2025. It equates to nine. Nine associate with Mars. Or associates with Mars, and nine is a number that represents completion, endings, and cycles pretty much coming to an end specifically. And we're ultimately seeing that, a lot of people used to fret and panic when at the thought of the end of the world, but now with what we're seeing that it's the end of a sense of normalcy when it comes to being aware of what's really happening across this globe. Humanity's consciousness has, been rising, and we're all being, presented with this opportunity to really stand up because, we have generations that will be left with our decisions and what we did in these very moments. And I'm going to say it again. I really want to encourage those of you who are in tune with your humanity and the sacredness of this journey. I hope that you all are doing your parts, whether it be just actively choosing to be mindful and what it is that you're aligning with and supporting and giving energy to and overall engaging with. Just be mindful and what that means when you are making those decisions. And I'll keep it moving further. I feel that those are all of the things that I really did genuinely want to talk about with you all. I do want to mention that maybe not today specifically, but sometime soon, I do have intentions on making more content on my other platform, which is Esoteric Sessions. And I specifically want to really expand on today's topic, which was the month of May. And I had a lot of things that I want to say about the cosmic transits and just I want to go more in depth about what the month of May means and talk about a lot more magical, cosmic, and ethereal and esoteric things. So, if any of those things are of interest to you, if you want to know about the cosmic transits and you'd like to hear my perspectives on these transits and just aspects and certain facts that I've gathered, while being on this journey. And I just want to tie everything in full circle because one thing that I've really loved about this sacred journey is that there's a beauty in all of these things when it comes to existence and how everything is pretty much connected. And I love making sense of things and getting down to why, we work the way that we work and, why is it that not even necessarily just why. I really just try to understand in the present moment and just really make sure that I'm in alignment versus being in alignment with a systematic approach to things. I really am all about embodying this natural journey and I also would like to mention another thing about grief. And at this point, I'll go ahead and bring it to an end because I feel like I've been recording for some time. This episode may definitely be over an hour long, but I do have intentions on bringing it to an end. So if you're still here, I really have gratitude for you being here. And speaking of gratitude, this is what I actually want to share with you all when it comes to gratitude. I feel like this part of my episode will tie into the part where I shared the influence and the inspiration of a statement that Regina King had made. And I shared that I really needed to hear those words because it really benefited me and it helped me at that time on my journey, especially at the height of me really, really healing the root of things. And I want to give this to you all with grief because I did acknowledge that it isn't just sunshine and clarity and, oh, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to breathe it away. No, no, no. Like I've shared with you all, there have been very tumultuous moments on this journey where I've had to, really acknowledge and sit with intense, and immense emotions. And, it wasn't an easy thing to do. I really didn't know I was that strong of an individual and that degree of the emotions that I was enduring. But I just thought I needed to say that because a lot of times on this sacred journey, or I shall say, some may call it spiritual, or however, I know for me, I call it sacred in essence. And I feel that a lot of times some people can only showcase and share the very, nice and pristine and positive, peaceful, calm moments on this journey without really, really acknowledging the darkness and how we really have to move through and navigate through those moments. And I just wanted to acknowledge that for those of you who are, or possibly could be in moments, or you may have experienced that already and you didn't have one validating you. I want to tell you, like, I get it. I know it isn't strawberries and Skittles or however one may look at it as a easy thing to do. It isn't. You have to be one strong individual. And that isn't to say that even in your moments of weakness, because I learned that even in my very moments of weakness, boy, did I gain, my strength in essence. Like I said, I didn't know that I had that much in me to really endure and overcome, really move through. There were moments where I really wanted to just really give in to my emotions. And at times, I really did allow myself to, you know, dwell there. But I knew better, not to really sit there and allow that to consume. But what I wanted to add to what I shared with you all with that statement is a positive, more to say. And I don't say that that was all negative, but just a refreshment to that wisdom that I gave to you all, when it comes to seeing grief from a different perspective. I wanted to give acknowledgement for how much gratitude that I had for even getting to know what grief is. Because grief is bound to, come about in life at certain periods. And like I said, grief can be measured by, different things. But specifically, the grief that I've experienced has been, an immense and intense amount of, situations. So I really see and I feel, I felt grief differently. And I've honored that. I've been really careful about, comparison and, well, that person did it and they got through it in that way. And I've learned a very long time ago that I cannot compare myself to an individual that is by, design created differently than I, and how they receive grief and process it and overcome it and, assess it and essentially observe it, or however their process looks. It's always going to be a bit different because I am too a unique individual that has been designed in a very unique and special way. And I've acknowledged that, and it alleviates any thoughts of comparison. Like I said again, if anything, it's inspiration. But with that being said, I want to talk about the gratitude and having to experience grief in those moments because, years ago, I had, when I was, enduring that grief and experiencing that, before I had this moment that I'll share with you all, and I just want to share it just to give you all, like I said, a refreshed, view and just a refreshment to what I've shared with you. I had a situation, that took place, or I say situations that really added to me being, once again, that episode that I dropped, some years ago or some time ago where I talked about the invitation to go deep within. And at that time, I had dealt with a plethora of different situations that aided in betrayal and essentially grief. And I remember I was actively healing myself, and I would always, speak to myself as in, I was within my God body because all of the things that I was learning was, so beyond me. It's nobody but the Most High that I even was allowed to have that view, a bird's view. I was able to see things clearly that I didn't really see, at certain moments, when I was really not allowing myself, I would say. But, in those moments, I really gained a lot of gratitude because I learned more about my body. I learned about my state of mind. I learned about my soul. I learned about my emotional state. I learned about, a lot of healthy things. I remember, in the spring of 2021 specifically, I had even changed the way I was eating. Like I said, I cut out meat, and I can remember clearly what I cut out, firsthand. And it really wasn't much of a challenge, especially when I knew that all of it was sacred and all of it was intentional, everything that I did in those moments. And I'm so grateful for that because the transformation that took place. And I'll say transformations because there were many deaths, rebirths, and me, really letting go ego and all of those things that take place when you're on that spiritual journey and that path to awakening. And I'm so grateful for that. And pain really led me to that, because had it not been for that pain and really allowing myself to feel that vast of emotions, that grief, opened up with that allowance. And with that, I gained a lot of gratitude because I learned a lot of lessons, and I just gained a lot of wisdom. And for me, it's like, there's nothing that I can't overcome. There's nothing that I can't get through. And I was so glad because I detoxed and I was just cleaning my vessel, like once again, my God body in essence. And I was really, mindful and committed to the things that I was doing in the beginning. And I still am to this day. But I remember getting pretty much a health scare, after that took place. And I just remember, moments of receiving people like Regina King's interviews and music such as Lauryn Hill's Unplugged on MTV, and her rawness and her authenticity. And all of those things that were so healing to me, meditation, Reiki, sound bowls, and just different frequencies, all of those things came about through me really accepting and acknowledging the grief that was coming up to the surface for me and allowing it to move through me and sitting with that. Like, I didn't want to just get up and go back into population and start a new situation. Like, no, like, I really want to be intentional. And I did that. And I feel that, had I not encountered those moments of grief, I wouldn't have that opportunity to really have the mercy that God had placed upon me. Like I said, I had a health scare, and thankfully it was just a scare. And I'll leave that there. And I may share more details in the future about this experience, but it's all in alignment with, God's love and being saved from situations that really could be the worst of, who you are in your journey. And, I thank God, although delayed, I am not, going into a direction that would have been for me had the results been the opposite. And in that very moment, even though there were a plethora of other things that I faced during that time, and like I said, it wasn't easy navigating, but one thing that really kept me at peace outside of the grieving and weeping, because I feel like I was doing more than crying. I was, my soul was weeping because there was so much, even outside of that experience that I was going through. The very thing that kept me peaceful was, knowing that I had the tools within myself to alchemize and heal. And not only that, I was just grateful once again, that God had mercy on my life. And it was just a scare. And that scare has really, stuck with me for some time. And it showed me the importance of really protecting myself. And I want to share that with you all as well. We live in a era where, certain practices, specifically sacred practices such as, sex and romance, or even family ties, friendships, sisterhood, brotherhood, motherhood, fatherhood. It's like so much of these things, even love, I feel it's like it's all a game. People aren't really in alignment with the choices that they chose to make. And I just want to encourage you all to always, always protect yourself when it comes to your mind, when it comes to your physical body, when it comes to your soul, when it comes to even your emotional state. protect yourself in all those ways. Everything that we get to experience on this planet, a lot of people take it for granted, but I myself, I don't. And I'm just so grateful to God that, I do have an opportunity, and I've just really honored my body even more, you know, with that mercy that God has given me. And I've been even more steadfast when it comes to even fasting and detoxing and just healing my body, because with the experience that I have, like most people, when they have health scares, essentially, the first things that they want to do, especially those that don't really give into what a westernized doctor may tell them, when it comes to their fate specifically, they don't give into that. They know more, and they're more in tune with the sacred alchemy, of the body. And like I said, I'm in gratitude for those moments. And so when you are, being open to acknowledging grief and, even taking some of the things that I've shared with you all, community, if you are one that is navigating grief, just know that on the opposite end of that, there are going to be a lot of things that you learn, a lot of wisdom, and just I feel that there will be moments of deep, deep, and great gratitude where you'll be thankful that you allowed yourself to really make space for the things that you feel, even the things that you feel in the deepest way. So I feel like that's pretty much all of the things that I do want to talk about. And I feel like I've done a lot of talking, but my whole intention in today's episode was just to talk about the month of May and the things that have come up for me. I feel like May, also esoterically speaking, is associated with the number five, and it is a month that feels like change, feels like miracles, feels like manifestation. It feels like conversation. And I say that because, we're now in the season of Taurus, and pretty soon we'll be going into Gemini season. And those are two very different elements and energies. And I feel like, as, with humanity, we're all collectively, cosmically being influenced by those energies alone, and with Taurus, that's Venusian energy that has to do with the plethora of things. And I'll just be very brief. It talks about love, when it comes to Venus, art, beauty, creativity and creation, balance, wealth, and harmony, and all those things. And then, switching into Gemini season, we have, air element, and it is associated with the planet of Mercury. And Mercury is all about communication, technology, travel, and speed. And, I really feel that collectively we will see these themes coming to the surface, and it's going to look different for everyone across the planet. But just know that we're all influenced by the cosmic transits outside of planet Earth, and it definitely plays a part in what we're feeling on a celestial level. But like I said again, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you have made it this far into today's episode, I thank you for listening in, and I hope that you have taken some, gems from this and apply it or implement it into your realities along your sacred journeys. And until next time, loves, stay genuine. Peace.